Every day, we make about 35,000 decisions. On today's show, we'll be talking about making those decisions and how to make them so they optimize our work and life. After my conversation with Madelaine, I'll be talking about another decision-making model for those moments when time is short and impact is high. So stay tuned. I'm Madelaine Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about activating the resilient leader in you. It never occurred to me that I have to be making decisions and have been making decisions from the moment I wake up. I get tired just thinking about that many decisions. But today we're going to talk about making decisions for someone, or from someone, I should say, who has looked at this for many years. She's Madelaine Weiss. And yes, it's the same name as me, just spelled a little differently, as you will see. And I'll bring her on so that you can see that. I always like working with Madelaine's, by the way. It's one of my favorite names.
Thank you. Thank you.
Madelaine Weiss is a board-certified executive, career life coach, a Harvard-trained licensed psychotherapist, and mindset expert, helping high-stress professionals, executives, and entrepreneurs thrive in work and life. She is co-author of the Handbook of Stressful Transitions Across the Lifespan and author of the best-selling Getting to Great, 5-Step Strategy for Work and Life, and the forthcoming What's Your Story? Building Your Best Adventures in Life and School, a personal development workbook for kids and the adults who love them. Oh, Madelaine, I just love that you're writing a book for kids.
I hadn't planned it, but it sort of emerged along the way when so many of my clients were saying, how come no one ever told me any of this when I was younger? And I thought, okay, fine, I'll do it. So, yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, again, yeah, there it is. Welcome to Unlocked.
Thank you.
All right, I want to get right into this. I want to know, why is decision making so hard, especially the really important ones?
I think we don't want to make mistakes, especially if it's a really important one. And we have this idea that there's more information out there than we have at hand in the moment. And we're right about that. What we don't understand as well as we could is that there is so much more information out there than we have at hand in the moment that we can never have perfect information. And waiting and waiting and waiting for perfect information, which a lot of people do, is, you mentioned that you're exhausted thinking about it. Doctors actually have a term for it now, which is decision fatigue. So by the time we get done waiting for all this perfect information we can never have, we're so exhausted that it impacts our decision making. So you know that I have this acronym, because I love acronyms, FLASH, and the F is for faster. Once you realize that perfect information is impossible, we can go a little faster. And the reason decisions are hard when they're hard is because there's equal threat and opportunity on both sides. That's what makes it hard. If one decision was much better than another, it would be easy. So, yeah.
Well, I'm really happy, though, that you talk about information and that we think we have to have it all, because I've written a lot on learning. And, the more you learn about learning, the more you know you don't know. it's sort of like the circle of knowledge just gets bigger and bigger, and it's the edge that just gets bigger and bigger. So in a decision making, that's exactly what's happening. You keep pushing, 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 and you know there's more.
There are, what is it, 6 times 70 million bits of information in the universe. The senses send 11 million of those, 11 million of the 6 times 70 million zeros to the brain every second. These are just fun facts. Out of those 11 million, we're aware of 50. So I always like to say anybody who thinks they're playing with a full deck is sorely mistaken. And though that's humbling, I think it, to use your word, unlocks us.
Yeah,
Mhm.
excellent. Okay, now you write about making decisions. What led you to focus on this particular aspect?
After I finished writing Getting to Great, I saw that statistic that you opened with, that we make 35,000 decisions a day. And I thought, holy moly, what are these 5 steps, if not a series of decisions that we make all day, every day? Those 5 steps are comprised of nothing more, no less than decisions that we make that shape our lives. So then I got, oh, and then I saw Forbes had said that decision making should be at the top of every business agenda. So I could not resist digging into the research to learn more about what makes this so hard, you know.
Hmm. All right. Well, now we tend to think of stress in our lives as coming from outside of ourselves. The new technology, organizational change, difficult personalities. Where does stress come from when making important decisions? I think you've hinted at some of them, but I'm going to give you some time to just really talk about that because I think people really worry about that.
I have a section in Getting to Great that is about what I call the TIC, which is otherwise known as the inner critic. So you've all maybe heard about the inner critic. Now, the inner critic, I think, really means to be helpful. It's trying to keep us safe, it's trying to motivate us. But what happens is that it bears down so hard on us sometimes that it's paralyzing. And then that feeling of not being able to get off the dime. I can't tell you how many people come to me to do work to help them to be unlocked. Again, to use your wonderful word, they would say they feel stuck. But part of what's, keeping them stuck is this voice inside the head. So I think that's what causes so much of that stress.
I really appreciate that because when I look at the issues around becoming more resilient, one of them is that you need to have a certain level of confidence in order to be able to make the decisions you need to make in order to move forward when you get hit with something unexpected. And when you're talking about that, I'm thinking to myself, this is what this is what the person needs to recognize, that they're certainly competent to do it. They just have to make sure they can convince themselves they're also confident enough to do
And
it.
there's only one way to convince ourselves that we're competent, which is to do it.
To do it. Yeah. And
So people sit there waiting. I love Mel Robbins. I don't know how many people have. She's wonderful. She says, nobody's coming to do this or that or the other thing for you. You have to do it yourself. And she said, if you're waiting until you feel like you have the confidence or the competence, or you're waiting till you feel safe, or you're waiting till it feels right, then you sit there stuck and you get anxious and depressed. So the only way that you can know And I know this firsthand from experiences in my own life. The only way you can know how competent you are is to do it and see that you did.
Yeah.
So it's like those participation trophies they give to little kids, which do not build self esteem
Mhm.
because the
Yes.
kid didn't see that the kid did anything.
Yeah.
So the trophy doesn't do it. We have to see it and feel it and touch it ourselves that whatever it is, we can handle it
You know,
because we did.
because we did. Yes. Yes. I talk to parents sometimes on how to build resilience in their children. And one of the things I begin with is this aspect of confidence. And I say to them, yes, it's important that you praise your child, that you encourage them, etc. But always make it specific. So the child is just as you said, the child has to know, hey, I'm getting praised because I did X,
Right.
and not just because, oh,
I'm
why? I
cute
don't know.
and they love me.
Yeah, right. But you want it to show to them through that praise, that affirmation, that they have agency. They have done something that was good.
Agency. Good word. Yep.
Yeah. All
Yep.
right. This is exciting, Madeline. Uh, I rarely get a chance to talk at this level of understanding of my work. So I'm so delighted that you're on
I
the show.
appreciate you that much too, just so you know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ah, well, my audience is made up primarily of people who are living their lives, they're pursuing careers.
Mhm.
Um, they're they're in the midst of their career, and they're making these conscious decisions. Now, I sometimes teach to talk to teenagers, and teenagers are sometimes making some of the most important decisions of their entire lives, which is which college to go to, what to work at. But there are times even at mid-career where you say, "Hey, I have to make a change." So let's let's talk about the advice that you would give them. How do they begin to apply in their lives so that they can make better decisions? What's most important?
So, a lot of people will come to me and they don't feel well and they think it's the boss or the spouse or the weather or whatever. And what it often turns out to be is a kind of boredom.
Ooh,
And I always say, like, the tree wants to grow. I think this is Carl Rogers, by the way. The tree wants to grow, the bird wants to fly, and so do we. And when we're not, we don't feel well. And so that's when those those urges to make a decision to do something else emerge and are like gifts to us. It
ah,
may not feel good, but it's a gift to us that it's time to grow. It's time to fly. It's time to do something different. And we're so the brain doesn't like to waste any energy. So if it keeps on doing what it's doing, it's pretty automatic. So it's inexpensive in terms of energy that the brain doesn't want to waste.
mhm.
But sometimes we have to spend a little energy to get from, meh to great in our lives. And that requires making a decision to go outside of the comfort zone.
I love that phrase, meh to great. I wrote that down. It just says it so well. And I truly do appreciate that you talk about the fact that as as creatures, I'll call us creatures, we do have um, we're here to do something, and when we can't, it's it does get the body must figure out, okay, there's something wrong here.
I like the way you said that we're here to do something, because people really, in general, I think, crave some sort of meaning and purpose, and they think they have to, like, go out there and find it somehow. But, the quieter the mind is, the more we can hear it bubble up from the inside. And again, your word, unlock. The idea, I think, is to, through that quiet, to unlock what that is so
Yeah.
that we can hear it and honor it, you know?
One of the first practices I ask my clients to do, and it always freaks them out, and I don't know why. I just say, spend 5 minutes a day in silence. I said, turn everything off and just don't worry about meditating or anything fancy. Just be in quiet. And they, well, I can't do that. I said,
For 5 minutes sounds like forever.
I know. I said, well, you just get on your phone, you put in 5 minutes and then you know that you're not going to go too long. And then, of course, what happens is after a while, if they really do it, they discover it's a very productive time because you're talking about the brain. And I love this conversation because we all have this frontal cortex that's so busy talking to us all the time. It blathers at it, I say, so that you can't hear the really deep thinking that goes on behind that. But when you're quiet, then you get,
Mhm.
I mean, I get blog ideas, I get product ideas, I get,
Yeah,
it's amazing what comes up.
yeah. You're right, but it has to be not noisy, so noisy in there that you can't hear it. On the other hand, that's the same part of the brain I always wanna put in charge of driving the bus. So, I've had, like, lots of clients say to me that they were taught that their decisions should be logical, and that's when I explain all the literature and science that shows that if you don't take the emotions into account, the decision making is extremely faulty. And there's all kinds of research on that. Um, like that one where there was a temporal lobe injury so that the emotional center and the cognitive centers were separated. They were not communicating with each other. And therefore, the participants would make choices that would put them into bankruptcy, but they couldn't feel that bankruptcy wouldn't feel so great. So when I was looking at your book and how you talk about unlocking the capabilities that are in there, there was a point in my life about like 20 years ago now where I was deathly ill. And people would say to me, it made you so strong. And to your point, I would explain to them that wasn't my sense of it. My sense of it was that the strength they were observing is in every single one of us. And we don't know it's there until we unlock it. So there were decisions that I had to make during that time that were positively astounding how quickly and how effective they were. And it was almost like channeling something because of the level of the decision making that incorporated both the emotion and the logic. So I teach people that certain kind of breathing, that polyvagal breathing, that so you want to show the hand model of the brain?
Oh, let's do it. Okay, it'll take me a minute to set them to bring it up.
I mean, I can show the hand model.
There it is.
Okay. So this is the hand model. It's Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain. And he talks about that when we are very excited, and I want to amend this presentation, this picture, to say that it's the positive, big emotions can include positive emotions too. So I have a client who gets so flattered when an investor says something positive that he can't think straight enough to negotiate well for himself. So it's not just the negative emotions, but this is the amygdala, and it's the alarm center. It tells you something's happening here that you're reacting to. And when this thing is a little too excited, Dan says it flips your lid, which means it knocks your logic offline. So now you have this out of control, purely emotional thing making decisions and driving the bus in your life. And we don't want that. What we want is for this to be calmed down. And this little 30-second mindset reset does that. For this to be calmed down just enough that this comes back online, the prefrontal cortex comes back online, and the amygdala can say to the prefrontal cortex, something's going on here. And I don't know. I don't know. And the prefrontal cortex says, thank you for sharing. I got it from here. So they work together, but you have your highest part of the brain making the ultimate decisions about your life.
Wow. I don't think I've ever heard it described so clearly.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you. All right.
Yeah.
It's great. And you know what I love about this is that it shows how the amygdala is really tucked inside the brain. It's tucked way.
That's right. By the way, on my website at madeleineWeiss.com, there's a tab at the top that says power breathing. And the instructions for the 30-second mindset reset are on there, of course, for free. In that tab, you can download it or just read it or whatever. So,
Is that something excuse me. Is that something that you can share right now? I mean, I'm willing to try.
sit up nice and straight,
Okay.
feet flat on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You can either close your eyes or simply gaze downward. What's different about this, and singers know this, when we breathe in, we tend to fill our lungs, and we don't want to fill our lungs. What we want to do is fill our belly, like the belly is a balloon, and you're going to fill the belly, not the chest. So, like, I'm going to watch you, and I'm not going to see your shoulders moving because you're filling your belly. You're not doing that. You're not filling your chest. And what that does is it stimulates what we call the polyvagal nerve, which runs from your abdomen all the way up to your brain. And it takes you out of fight, flight, freeze, sympathetic nervous system mode and puts you in parasympathetic, which is the calming and focus. Now, people worry they're going to get so calm that they're not going to be able to think well. And that's exactly not the case. That the fact is that it actually sharpens our focus and we can think more clearly at a higher level because we've kicked it upstairs to the higher brain. So we've taken it from the reptilian brain and the middle brain upstairs with all the information that was provided from below. So you may look down or close your eyes, and we're going to take 3 really deep, luxurious breaths in through the nose and also out through the nose. Real nice and deep. Belly out on the in breath. You can practice this before we start. Try it now. Belly out on the in breath, belly in on the out breath, belly out on the in breath, belly in on the out breath. And you may begin 3 luxurious breaths, belly out on the in breath, in through the nose and out through the nose.
Well, I'm feeling very calm.
I put a version of that in here for the kids, and I called it the ATM way to happiness. And then I made a joke. No, it's not where your mom goes to get cash for the. But the idea was first to acknowledge what you're feeling and then to do this breathing exercise to team up with. So, A, acknowledge, T for team up with the higher brain, and to now then be able to make M a plan of action.
You know, what I love about that is that it is clear and simple for even a child to learn. I mean,
Well,
I can see a 6-year-old even learning that.
what really tickles me, I love this. I gave it to, I was doing some work for a VP of a financial services firm. And I just mentioned that I was writing the book, and he said, "Oh my God, I have kids. When it's done, you have to send it to me." So when it was done, I sent it to him, and he wrote back like this much. He just carried on about it. But what he said that I thought was so compelling was that he was catching his kids breathing now when they felt upset about whatever it was. And then he added, and I'm learning something too for himself. And he said that the kids now catch him when he's reacting instead of responding, and they call him on it. So he and his kids, they did it on vacation. He said they have a common language now where they can help each other to act and make decisions and behave in the world on a higher plane than they otherwise would, which just makes all the difference, you
Wow,
know?
that is an amazing story.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah,
Of course, it was music to my ear.
of course, as it should be. Well, I love stories because you can learn so much from them. It gives, and I think the key with a story is it's not just the lesson that you learn; it's the context in which and that allows you to say, well, I may not be exactly like that, but I see a common thread that's like my context. I mean, you talked about it being a financial advisor. Well, I'm not a financial advisor or a banker or whatever, but I know I make heavy decisions. Okay, then I can do that. Yeah, beautiful. Well, there's another place where we learn, and that's when we write. I don't know
Mhm.
about you, but I learn so much when I write a book, when I write a blog, anything that I write. I think it has to do with the fact that you have to really clarify what you want to say, uh, without anything going with it, like your hands or emotions or face. Anyway, it forces you on. So when you're writing, um, what have you learned beyond what you imagined that you knew?
Well, I don't think I realized until after Getting to Great was finished how Darwinian it was. The first line of the book was is a great life depends on a great fit between who we are and the environments in which we live. And then I realized,
It's pure
okay, so
Darwin.
Darwin and Wallace, by the way,
Yeah.
said that 100 years ago or whatever it was. And it's as true today as it was in his conception of it. What's different now is that we have, as creatures, to use your word, we have this higher cortex. So we can actually impact those environments in ways that, as earlier beings in our evolution, we couldn't. It was mostly adapting to. But now we can choose our environments more than we could then. We can modify our environments more than we could then. But the point is, there has to be a fit.
Mhm.
And when there's not a fit, like a fish out of water, things don't go well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I often talk about plants because you can't tell a plant what to do, and you can't make them do anything other than grow.
I have to think about that. Yeah.
And I say to people, how do you help them do what you want them to do? All you do is create the best environment that they want. So if it's a desert plant, it's got to have good drainage. If it's a tomato, you better make sure that there's nitrogen in the soil. I mean, it's you have to create the
I have
environment.
to tell you something. It has been one of the great mysteries of my life how my plants do so well. I don't know anything about plants, nothing. And they all thrive somehow without a lot of thought and without a lot of knowledge. And I don't understand it. It feels it feels like spiritual or something.
Mm, well, we might have a conversation on that separately where we can get into some of the.
Someday, yes, indeed.
Sometimes it has to do with the type of plant because some plants will handle very wide varieties of environments. So you can abuse it and it doesn't care. And others are quite picky. So it's an interesting conversation.
That
We need to have that.
that's a hardy one back there.
Yeah, it looks like a philodendron. Yeah,
Look how
very.
happy and fluffy it is.
Yeah, but it's very hardy. It's very hardy.
Well, then they probably I got two there, one there. They're all anyway. I digress.
You digress. But
I
and
do.
again, coming back to it, the key if you want the plant to do something, you have to have the right environment for it. Even though it may tolerate a wide range, you still have to create the right environment, and that's how we are. And I often talk to managers about that. I say, "What's the environment you're creating for your team if you really want the team to work?" So,
Well, the E in the acronym GREAT, G dot R
yeah,
dot
yeah,
E
yeah.
dot, yeah, is exploring the environment, but I specify and distinguish the internal and external. So, like, for example, one of my clients just picked up his whole family and moved to the other side of the world because he was a doctor and he thought the healthcare system in wherever he went on the other side of the world would be a better environment for the way he wanted to practice. But I've had many, many clients who rearranged the furniture in their heads, took care of the internal environment and fell in love with exactly where they were because they modified the internal environment. So it's not always changing things outside of oneself, although sometimes it is that, but it's not always that. So there's a distinction there.
Hmm. I really like that metaphor. They rearrange the furniture inside.
Yep. Just move things around a little bit. One of the best moments was when this client, totally unsolicited by me, shows up one day and she said, I realize my life is 85% pretty good. And that other 15%, talk about resilience, that other 15% is nothing I can't handle. I can't tell you how miserable this woman was when I first met her. Like everything and everybody was no good. And she was so miserable about it all. And she did not change the external environment. She just figured out what was causing her that internal stress that you mentioned and sorted it out. And it came to her like it happened over time, but it felt like it came to her all at once. Like, aha.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I, it's interesting. I believe that human beings have to. Now, let me say that differently. We change incrementally because that's part of staying alive and safe is to change incrementally. And it gets finally to the point where I think we finally recognize what's happened, and then you get the aha.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, we tend to think, and I think we've already talked about some of this, but I want to make sure we get into it. We've talked about decision making as something that happens in the workplace. Uh, and there are so many decisions that as parents and children and members of society that we make. Are the factors that stress us different? And if so, does your advice work for them as well? In other words, if I'm trying to make a decision at home versus at work.
I think everything is connected to everything else. As John Kabat-Zinn would say, wherever you go, there you are. Um, so I always tell people you could talk to me about your trip to the grocery store, and we will get something for you that will help you in your life. Some learning about how you do your business in the world. You could tell me like your trip to the cleaners or whatever, because wherever you go, there you are, and you learned how to do your business in the world like pretty much like when you were by the time you were 5, and it became so ingrained and automatic that your strategies are like you're not even well aware of them. But it's like having a 5-year-old in charge of our life, and it doesn't matter whether it's at home or at work or grocery shopping or whatever, wherever you go, there you are. And it's really important for people, I think, to make the unconscious conscious, to bring the strategies to light. And as an adult, do some tweaking, put a couple new tools in the toolkit so that there's a flexibility, which is such an important part of the resilience that you talk about, being able to fit responses to the situation at hand rather than reacting in the only way we know how because we've been doing it for decades.
When you say that, I'm thinking to myself, okay, Madelaine, what is it that you do that's, I'll call it habitual? Um, and one of the things I do, for example, is I like to make lists. And I've always done that from the time I learned how to write, you know.
Okay.
And I think that's what you're talking about, yes? Or maybe there's more.
Well, that is an example, and there are many other examples of how people navigate in their lives. And people are idiosyncratic. You know, we're all unique in our ways, although there may be patterns. But most importantly, is it working for us? So there's this exercise I like to do with people: stop, start, continue. So when they do an assessment of whether these things are working or not, they can look at what they're doing that really is working and they want to continue doing those. They can look at what else they could be doing that maybe was outside of the comfort zone that they can try, so they can start those. And then they can look at, you know, I have something I call the misery gap. The misery gap is the space between the way that little 5-year-old thinks things should be and the way things are. So if part of your strategy is you just keep beating on it harder and harder and harder till you think you're going to get what you want from that person, place, or thing out there, that's a strategy that might not be working that well. But if one has an idea that that's the right way to go about it, then what's lost is that it's not having a good outcome. So that might be something we want to stop.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm thinking about this thing of making lists. There was a point at which my lists became so long that I would get confused in the morning as to what to do. And I think I sort of invented your start, stop, continue, because what I said to myself was, you have too many options that you're choosing between.
Uh-huh.
So force yourself. Just force yourself to pick only 3 and write a little list with 3 of them and see if that makes the day go better, and B, you get done what you need to get done. And I was shocked that in fact it worked. And I continue that today.
That's wonderful. It brings to mind things like time, money, lists. These are things that are designed to serve us. What can happen too often is that they become in charge of us instead of us in charge of them. And we forget that humans invented time to serve us, to make things easier and better for us. Humans invented money to make things better for us, to serve us. And we forget that and we become slaves to our lists
Yeah.
or whatever other time management thing we might have. Like I think I even have a program called The Tyranny of Time. So, but also money. So those two big ones. So we always have to remember this thing is meant to serve us and make things better. And if it's doing that, great, it can stick around. But if it's not serving us and not making things better, then it needs tweaking, which is exactly what you did.
Yeah. You occasionally you talk about comfort, and I'm always reminded of one of the things I discovered in writing the book on Unlocked was that anyone who is interested in increasing their resilience and simply living an easier life never confuse comfort with safety.
Never confuse comfort with safety.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
I think people want to stay in their comfort area. I mean, for me, long lists was a comfort area. It made me think like I knew what I was doing. I was in
Oh,
control,
yeah,
and it was comfortable there. And then finally, I recognized there was this other discomfort that was coming in,
right.
and so it wasn't the safe place that I thought it was.
There was a study that learning and motivation takes place 70% outside of the comfort zone.
Yeah,
Because what it does is it says to the brain, like, again, the brain doesn't want to waste any energy. So when you're in your comfort zone, the brain thinks everything's cool here.
yeah,
And the learning and motivation centers turn off. So when you're outside of your comfort zone, not so far out that you freak yourself out, but enough out that your brain gets turned on, like, whoa, something's happening here. It learns, it's motivated, meaning that it wants to do more and more and more. So, yeah, dis- discomfort is our friend
is our
as
friend.
long as again, we're in charge of it instead of it in charge of us.
Well, speaking of being in charge, we're
Yeah.
out of time. But I want people to make sure that they know how to get in touch with you.
Okay. So it's madeleineWeiss.com. You can use my name spelling there, is my website. All of my links are there. The 2 books are right at the top if anyone is interested in clicking on those. The What's Your Story is launching on November 19th. Getting to Great is already available. Again, there are blog posts aplenty, and in the search bar, you can put whatever topic is of interest to you, and it'll pull up what I might have written on that. And the power breathing is there. Please help yourself to that. I think that's everybody's best friend forever. Just that one thing. Like if you take one thing,
Mhm.
take that, integrating your whole self to be and do and have the very best.
Wonderful. And I want to tell our audience, because some of our audience only listens,
Okay.
that your Madelaine is spelled Madelaine,
Correct.
Weiss,
Yeah.
Madelaine, thank you so much. This has been
Oh,
such
thank
a
you
pleasure.
too. This is so great. Thank you.
Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself. Making a decision is an action. It directs the next step to an objective. Today, I want to talk about the lessons I learned from a book called Sources of Power: How People Make Decisions by Gary Klein. And I've been talking with Madelaine all about this aspect of making decisions. Klein takes it from another perspective, and I thought you would appreciate seeing a second one. You know, decision is, to me, the first step in resilience. So preparing for that step is actually about preparing for that decision. Now, as I prepared for my conversation on optimizing decision making, I remembered a book, this one. I had read it some time ago. And when I looked at my library, I was surprised to see that the edition was actually one that is the 20th anniversary. Now, any nonfiction book that continues to be marketable after 20 years says a great deal about the value of its content. The first thing I remembered from my earlier read was that the book begins describing the research project that was done to gather the insights published in the book. As a person who loves research, the description was as much fun to read as the presentation of the findings. Klein lays out what he and the research team felt were the purpose and guiding questions for the research, only to discover that many of them were wrong. That happens in research if you are open to the results of your research, even as you pursue it. Any good researcher lays out a set of questions and then begins to gather data from them. Before moving on, however, they look at the data coming in from the questions, and only then do you see what questions get the kind of substance you're really looking for, and what questions simply are not relevant. Klein lays this out clearly, along with the responses, and discusses how the research design changed. Not everyone is quite so open about this phase of their research. They prefer to describe what they eventually did as if it had never came into any examination and adjustment. As I read it, I felt a strong sense of trust building between me and the author. By the way, most examples of decisions that the team researched were those of firefighters and their commanders. Cases of urgency where you needed speed, and importance and risk where lives were at stake, as well as economic value, and observable impact. The impact is either immediate or obviously evident, and certainly any changes in the context or the environment. So it was a very specialized area, but I think you'll discover there's a lot of insights, and if I might add, even some parallels to what Madelaine was talking about. So when Klein laid out his decision model, I could see how it came about and why it was more complex than many models. I'm not going to talk about his model. You'll just have to read the book. But I will talk about the factors that I saw in his model, which he calls, by the way, Recognition Primed Decision Model, the RPD, which takes into account that decisions are made recognizing something familiar in the problem. That's all I'd like to say here, as his description builds on and well describes the experiences of the researchers. What I want to focus on is what I call the factors that leapt out to me as I read the details. There are more factors, but these are the ones that I focused on: experience, observation, confidence to act, and imagination. Now, experience means that the decision maker uses knowledge gained through previous decisions made, memory of what happened, knowledge of implications. I have often talked about the value of lifelong learning. No matter if our learning is from books or from life experience, having a mind that is open to learning allows lessons that might be unexpected to be seen and to register in our general body of knowledge. That we bring that to our next decision point. Highly resilient people are always learning by virtue of the fact that they often bring vast knowledge to the next unexpected moment when they must decide how they will be resilient. Observation. At no point during the decision making and the impact of resulting actions does that decision maker look away. He or she constantly reviews the impact of the actions directed by the decision, allowing the decision maker to enhance their knowledge. After years in school and workshops and trainings, we often forget that every baby learns how to talk, walk, socialize through observation. Just like babies, we can continue to learn through observation if we choose to remain open to what is around us. Highly resilient people tend to take advantage of what is around them and to learn from it. Confidence to act. This is an exciting factor to me. It tells me so many things about the decision maker and the environment they live in. First, the decision maker feels a sense of support from his or her working environment. I mean, this may come from rank, or it may come from the trust of others. Second, the decision maker is confident in the knowledge they have in their personal reservoir of knowledge, that while it may not be complete, Adler talked about that, it never is, they have sufficient confidence to build on what they have. Imagine the possibilities and make a decision based on that. Third, they have confidence that ambiguity does not freeze them into non-action because they've done it before. Decision rarely is one done with every data point filled in. Building on their ability to imagine, they will take into account all they do know and what they don't know and still be able to act. And speaking of imagination, imagination was also on that list. We often think of imagination as thinking about something that doesn't exist. More valuable to the decision maker is to imagine what might be around the corner, or over the top, or lies between the gaps, under the assumptions, and then probing to answer the question. They not only imagine well, they are curious. Their curiosity feeds their imagination and pushes the boundaries of what they know so they can find new knowledge to feed their decision making. Like highly resilient people, they are almost insatiably curious. These factors, in slightly different language than used by Klein, give me such insight into how decision making in unexpected moments looks so much like the factors I observed by those with apparent strong resilience, who also made decisions in the unexpected. There is so much more in Klein's book. More detail on the factors, tons of stories that illustrate the various points, graphic presentations, and easy-to-read text. He has chapters on the power of intuition, to the power to see the invisible, and more. There is much to learn about the sources of power active in decision-making. Experience, observation, confidence to act, imagination. Every one of these can be acquired. You can enhance your resiliency as you enhance your decision-making. You have the agency. You can decide to practice them. Then watch them grow. Sources of Power: How People Make Decisions by Gary Klein. I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation and learned something new. And if you have a question, by all means, just send me an email. Go to my website and you can get my email. MadeleineBlair.com is the website. You can send it to me, Madeleine@MadeleineBlair.com. Schedule a free consultation, or you can just send me an email and I'll respond. And if you're on YouTube, click the like button. And if you don't, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. I'm Madelaine Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilient leader.